Homage to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Let's look at this question of how do you start your day? It's an important question because this is what you lead with as you begin your day. How do you wake up in the morning? How do you get out of bed? Does it take you a long time? How is the mind when you wake up? What are the first things that you say when you see someone? What is the tone? So when you think about starting the day, what is your usual habit or routine? Do you start with a puja, offering flowers or tea to the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha? Do you start with a morning sit, 10 minutes, half an hour, an hour? Or do you do walking meditation in the morning? Did you set your alarm early in the morning in order to do that? Or do you scramble in the morning where you have many responsibilities? So you make food for your family, make the lunches for your children, maybe even pack their school bags. Or maybe you're doing ironing, helping out your husband or wife to prepare. Or do you start with exercise? Each person is different, but what is important is really to look at how you start your day. And the reason behind it is because when you think about starting your day, do you start off immediately with kusala, so what is wholesome? Or do you start with akusala, something that is unwholesome? And when you think about your speech, the first people that you see in the morning, what is your speech like? What is the tone? Some of us, when we wake up, we start with akusala. The first things that we think of are not kusala, and we're on autopilot. Maybe the first kinds of things that you do is to look at your phone, turn on the television, turn on the radio. And the reason why it's akusala is because it's listening to wrong view or looking at things which pollute the mind. When we wake up from sleep, the mind is actually somewhat peaceful, and that's relatively so. It hasn't actively been putting things into the mind. And so it's very important what you do when you first wake up and how you start your day. So some people as well, they're very virtuous when they wake up. They think about others. It may be the family or maybe other people. A story that comes to mind is there's a man that what he does is he's always carrying bags of food and he's feeding the stray dogs on the beach. That's the first thing that he does. And you see him walking up and down the beach, leaving little mounds of rice, food for the stray dogs. That's the first thing that he does to start off the day around 6 o'clock in the morning. And this is a contrast to the fishermen out on their boats. The first thing that they do isn't to eat or do anything like that. They might have a drink, but they jump into their boats and they go off to catch fish. That's quite a contrast because that's killing. And then when you bring it back home, if you're a parent, if you're a mother or father, and the first thing you do is think of your children, you make the breakfast, you help them to wake up. These are very generous things. You don't have to do it in some cases, but the fact that you do it, it's an extremely generous thing. Sometimes we forget this aspect to what we do when we start our day. And it's good to make it very, very conscious. Make it conscious. What do you do? How do you start? Is it wholesome? It's important to reflect on one's goodness. If you start your day with giving, selflessness, generosity, even virtue, it helps you to start your day well so that no matter what unfolds during the day, this is what you can rely on, lean back on. As householders, there are many challenges that come with working, that come with running a household, that come with being out in the world. And so these challenges do come. And so knowing that they come, at least you begin your day with a wholesome intention and wholesome actions to start your day. These can be big and small things, but they do have an impact because particularly when you start the day with Dhamma, very consciously start the day with Dhamma, If you start with a puja, if you start with meditation, then you're really going against wrong view. When you sit, you make effort. When you do walking meditation in the morning, you make effort. And when you develop the mind, you're going against all the dasa akusala, the 10 unwholesome. All the sutta meditations, they're really purifying for unwholesome conduct by body, speech and mind. And there's something very special about beginning the day with right view. Because at this particular point, as you start your day, the priority is the truth of our predicament. And so that balances whatever you get swept into during the day. Our work tends to pull us in to the work view. The work view makes itself seem very important, and there's lots of dramas that happen during the day at work, or there's lots of issues that need handling that seem so important, and even worldly family things or things in the community, politics, economics. These things all pull us out into the world. And yet when you start with the right view at the beginning of the day, you have something to counterbalance all these other things. The good thing about beginning with kusala, with what is wholesome, what is right view, is that over time you notice that you're less affected by things. You also notice that you become more conscious of things during the day. You catch things that maybe you didn't catch before. You might stop before you do something unwholesome. And by the time you get to the end of your day, there's less regret because you managed to withstand these particular challenges of the day. Venerable Sariputta says in the Sammādiṭṭhi Sutta, he says to the monks, when a noble disciple understands the unwholesome and the root of the unwholesome, the wholesome and the root of the wholesome, in that way he is one of right view, whose view is straight, who has unwavering confidence in the Dhamma and has arrived at this true Dhamma. So sometimes we think that we need long stretches and time on retreat, or maybe even some of us think, oh, we can wait until all the conditions are set. But this Dhamma practice, this path that the Buddha is showing us, it actually can be activated at each and every moment. And one of the best times to activate it is at the beginning of the day, when the mind is fresh or somewhat fresh. And although the day can be quite challenging and there may be not enough time to meditate, not enough time to even take a moment for yourself, the mornings are often the best times. Maybe you can set the alarm a little earlier. Or if you can't do that, maybe what you can do is look at how you start your day and recalibrate it. Change it up a little bit, even as you're preparing the breakfast or making lunches for your children or going into work. If you commute, these are little pockets of time where you really contemplate how you start your day. It could be simply reflecting on the Buddha's words, one simple statement. That helps you. The Buddha's words have a power behind them because of the enlightenment of the Buddha, because the Buddha speaks of truth and the supreme happiness. If we don't start with kusala, what is wholesome, then we are driven by the unwholesome. That leads us into the rest of our day, and we get swept along with the tides of what is unwholesome, what is rooted in unwholesome. But the empowering part of it is that we all have choices. We all have opportunities to make wise choices. So when you think about body, speech and mind, you think about the different wholesome things that one can do. What do you lead with? What is in the mind that is leading? What comes out of our mouths first thing in the morning? What are our actions towards our loved ones before we go out into the world? When you consciously hold back from unwholesome within the four walls of your house, it sets the tone for the rest of the day. If you restrain yourself from unwholesome speech, unwholesome actions, it's very helpful. And when you reflect on any generosity as you start your day, any things that you're grateful for, any amount of virtue that you begin your day with, allow the mind to get happy. Contemplate that. Know that that's what you're doing, that it is wholesome. Use that for a pocket of happiness, for a pocket of joy, to know that you're walking the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path. It can be as simple as that. We often make certain things quite difficult, knowingly and unknowingly. We have sometimes very grand ideas about Dhamma practice, Dhamma knowledge, this path and practice, but it can be much simpler than that. All we need to infuse in our daily practice is what is wholesome and what is rooted in wholesome, and to really stamp out as much as possible what is unwholesome and what is rooted in unwholesome. The easiest part for doing that is at the start of the day, because it gets more challenging as the day goes on. And then when you close your day, you're purifying. It's important to break bad habits. This is part of the Buddha's teaching, reprogramming things that are our underlying tendencies, our bad habits, and not create new bad habits. So one of the most common bad habits in our modern times is being addicted to our phones. And for many people, what we do is we pick up our phone first thing when we wake up. And it's not simply because we want to look at the time or turn off the alarm. It's actually because we want to start scrolling. Most people, what they do is they start looking at the news and start looking at their messages. And this is probably one of the things that you don't want to do, if at all possible, when you start your day. Those few moments, those few precious minutes that you have before you're called on to really start your day, they're very precious because this is what you lead with. So if you scroll through the news, as an example, the question to ask is, what is usually in the news? What is so important that you need to look at it? What's happened overnight or things like that? What is so important that you need to turn on the TV and have the news running in the background? What is so important that you need the radio doing the same thing, or even to have certain things playing? A lot of subliminal things come through background noise, in news, in the radio, even in the lyrics for music. And it's something to really think about before you unconsciously just turn it on. So when it comes to the news in particular, and you're scrolling through the news or you have it on in the background, it's important to know what is being programmed or what is being projected onto you. What is usually in the news? It's usually bad news. Predominantly it's bad news. It's usually about killing. It's usually about misconduct, maybe even stealing. And then when you come to the speech, it's usually divisive, maybe even harsh speech. And there's usually deception and lies. The thing about even the news is you can't figure out what is true. Maybe it's meant to be that way. That's the era of what we live in and live with at the moment. And the rest of it is really idle chatter. So when you think about that, you think at a mental level, what's infused is ill will, covetousness, and definitely wrong view. So from that perspective, it's really good to not start with that, not to have it as your first thing that you infuse or imbue the mind with. Quietness is actually more wholesome than that. And if you're inclined or you have the time for meditation to actually do one of the meditations that the Buddha has taught us, that's even better. Delighting in Dhamma is something that happens when you start to develop the path. You see the value of it. You understand what you get out of the meditations, the development of the mind, and it's extremely wholesome. Each person has different circumstances, different challenges, different conditions. But the important thing is that you work with your conditions and you carve out the opportunity to start your day in a wholesome way. So as part of daily practice, really look at how do you start your day? And really look at how do you want to start your day? Do you want to start it with right view? With virtue, with generosity, selflessness, simplicity? What are the ingredients? So I'll leave it here. Wishing you well, blessings of the Triple Gem. Theruwan saranai.